She would have had to put it in earlier.
Yeah. Okay, we are live on YouTube.
Hi, YouTube.
And then let me. Mhm. Okay, I'm going to broadcast on Zoom.
Yay! Welcome, everyone. Welcome to Free Your Mind Mental Health Discussions. I'm Jessica Somerville.
And I am Pastor Enid Henderson of Jones Memorial United Methodist Church.
Yes, my new best friend. So this is actually our last session, kind of bittersweet, but mostly sweet because we're going to get a really, really, really great information like we have from the last two sessions. But before we start, Pastor Enid and I was thinking, hey, let's do some small recaps, maybe talk about some jewels that we got from the last two sessions to discuss with you guys. So the first session title was COVID-19 stress. Strategies that work. And that was actually with Dr. Lewis and Laverne West. So Enid, in your opinion, what were some things about that session that you liked?
So thank you, Jessica. That one, I was reminded of how important it is to laugh again. And they really poured, I thought did an effective job of reminding us about self-care, how to look out for yourself, how to set healthy boundaries, and how to be there in the time of need for others. So really enjoyed that conversation, and just the strength of knowledge that they provided was really a blessing. How about you?
Definitely agree. Definitely agree. Because it's so many things going on right now. It's easy to kind of be, what the kiddos say, in a sunken place. So making sure that we can kind of highlight. I think one of the things they mentioned was write down all your blessings each day. At the end of the day, just kind of remind you, to be very present in the moment. There's also some good things going on in the world. So.
Absolutely. And, who can forget the little quick exercises that they showed us? You don't always have to be at the spa, but just simply rubbing your hands together and placing them there for just a moment was really important.
That was good. I can't believe you actually, I did not even remember that. You have such a great memory. Yes, that was actually very good to take out that time and do those meditation exercises.
Yes.
I actually did that a few days ago and it worked. I was like, okay, just, got myself quiet, got the room dark, relax a little bit so I can just get back on it, and jump right back into work.
Yes, absolutely.
Definitely, for sure. So then our next session, the second session, was with Paige Cryer, and she's a counselor, and it was about psychological first aid for supporting our children and youth. So what did you get out of that? What were some jewels for you?
So I thought Paige did a very effective job of just reminding us how we need to be intentional with our children, right? How we need to listen to them, just be aware of what they're experiencing, watching out for habits or for things that may seem different in their life, so we can get them need. So it was very enlightening. And even how I love how she shared about how you can help them prepare to go back to school, to return to school. Thought that was really awesome, and just a lot of nuggets. So I know we'll be sharing the resources that she sent out to us as well. That had some really good tips for parents and even caregivers also.
Absolutely. She did provide a very, very good presentation and left us with a lot of resources that, just like Pastor Ian mentioned, she'll be able to provide for you guys. Even if she puts it in the text in her chat, or you can reach us afterwards for the sessions and she can provide you with those resources. And I think one of the highlights that I took from that session was dealing with kids in grief, because we knew that, people, right now with COVID and everything going on, there's death, and making sure to be just upfront about it with your kids and talk about them, of course, in an age appropriate way, but not try to hide it from them, of course. And then, making sure that you also are transparent as a adult to show that grieving is okay. So it's okay to cry in front of your kids. It's okay to be sad in front of your kids. It's okay to be vulnerable, because that teaches them how to wrestle with emotion and then not try to just kind of sweep it under the rug. I think one of those things she said was about the somebody said it, the memory box, the grief box. That was a really good idea.
Absolutely. I agree. Very informative, very timely for this season that we're in. And that video, the recording of that video, you can actually find on our Facebook channel. So if you go to facebook.com/The Highway Church, you'll see the video there with Paige and Jessica and myself. Very informative and definitely worth the listen to.
Absolutely. And then the session 1 video also is on the YouTube channel, correct?
YouTube channel. Yes. So youtube.com/The Highway Church.
Absolutely. See how everything's so available. I love it. Just the resource. I mean, just there. So if you miss any of those sessions, we definitely advise you to go back, look at them and view them. Nice, quick, easy, for you to get all the tools that you may need and pull out some of those nuggets. Another thing that she also mentioned with that session with Paige prior was being intentional about playing or interacting with your kids every day. That was a huge thing, especially with COVID. We already feel like you're kind of under your kids all the time, but not necessarily really truly engaging them in things that they like, right?
Absolutely. So Jessica, what can we expect tonight? I am really excited about our time together with Dr. LaWanda Hill. So what can we expect tonight? And what if our guests have questions? How do we guide them in that?
Okay, so first let's talk about the question. So you guys are free to always, if you have questions, go into that chat, type those questions up. Pastor Enid is on it. I mean, she's been getting people's questions answered, meeting their needs with the resources. So feel free to do that all throughout the presentation. And then even after the presentation, when we're done speaking and talking, you can still chime in and we'll still be able to answer your questions and support you in any way we can. And also, as she mentioned, even after the session is complete, we'll give you all of our contact information, and then you can reach out to us as well as the presenters to contact them if you need extra help or if you want to schedule sessions or things that you just may need for your personal life or professional life as far as counseling is concerned. But for today, today is really good. I'm really excited about today. Okay, so today, I know the title for today is basically talking about in regards to African American women and their plight of handling mental health and wellness. So the focus is more so on microaggressions. That's kind of been like a buzzword in the mental health world. And if you kind of see it on social media, microaggressions, especially in terms of systemic racism. So today we're going to kind of just dissect it with Dr. Hill, find out what is microaggressions, what it is that term mean, and most importantly, what does that term mean in regards to African American women and how that affects us in our mental health.
Absolutely. And so before we start our time together, I want to invite us to pray as we get ready for this evening. If you all would join me in prayer. Lord God, we thank you for just creating moments where we're able to set aside and be still and sit with one another, learn together, grow together, help be shaped together. We thank you for the invaluable resources and the connections that we're able to experience. We just ask for peace that surpasses all understanding. We ask for your hedge of protection. We ask for your wisdom and your insight. Lord, all of the stresses in our lives, we turn it over to you. We thank you. Be with us on this evening, God. Guide the conversation. Let you be glorified in all the work that we do. And let our hearts be transformed. Let our minds and body and spirit be transformed and touched. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Amen. So again, like we had mentioned before, first I want to just say thank you so much to Jones Memorial, the Highway Church, for just giving us this platform to share with the community and being able to give out these resources free. So we can definitely capitalize off of it. Also, just a little special shout out to Pastor Enid Henderson. She's been like a godsend. Everything's been super smooth and seamless to set this up with us with the Church and Community Health Initiative. And we're through the Texas Annual Conference. The initiative is funded through the Methodist Hospital. So we're just really happy to be just in partnership and collaborating with Jones Memorial. So just thank you so much for the platform.
Absolutely. It is absolutely a blessing and a pleasure. I know you and I have had a number of conversations about how important mental health is and how important it is for us to get start the conversations and have those conversations and make these resources available to our communities so that we can be equipped and empowered and recognize the signs and everything that we need to do to take better care of ourselves. And so at Jones Memorial, the Higher Way Church, we're focused on the whole person, not just a portion of the person. So this is very important to Pastor Levingston, our senior pastor, and myself. And we just can't wait to continue this journey. And our partnership with Church and Community Health Initiative has been extremely valuable and a great blessing to us. So we thank you, Jessica, for your leadership and all that you do. Yeah,
thank you very much. We appreciate it. So while we're waiting on Dr. Hill to log in, I wanted to ask, I know that Jones Memorial, that you guys offer some services, mental health services for church members or even maybe possibly community members. What does that look like, or what is it that you guys offer?
Yeah, again, so just to remind everyone, this is very important to us. We know that families and individuals, whether you're single or married or a grandparent or a new parent, we know that there are difficulties and we're going to all go through some difficulties at some time. So we've never shied away from the conversation about mental health and recognizing that getting the proper help that you need is important. So one of our partnerships is with the Chris Samaritan Center. And so we have a therapist psychologist that offers out of our church, and Reverend Aaron Simpson. And so there are times when we have members who come and may be dealing with something that, because pastors, as much as we love the congregation, we are just not therapists, and we are not the ones that, you want to seek to for help to get the level of help that you need. So we try to provide resources for our members who've been with us in the congregation. If they say, hey, I don't have the funds for this, because that's another issue. A lot of times our community believes that, oh, I can't afford therapy, but you can afford to take care of yourself, and that's something that you want to invest in. You want to invest in yourself. So we help and we will support that person to make sure that they receive the help and the support that they need as best as we can. We try to walk with families and everyone. So they know either reach out to myself, Pastor Henderson, or Pastor Levingston, and we do what we can do to connect them to the right resources to get the help that's needed.
Awesome. I think I just want to highlight that because I think that's such an amazing thing to provide to individuals, especially, I mean, you usually just don't think of, hey, maybe I do need to schedule a session to talk to someone about things that I'm struggling with, that I'm working with, and there's absolutely no shame in that. It's actually a strong thing to do to be in the realization that you need an extra help. So being able as a member, if you're in need, go get the help. Don't, like she said, don't let it be something of an issue of finances that keeps you from getting your mental health and addressing those issues. And does this also are these resources also available to children as well?
Absolutely. So, and children, I know even Texas Children's Hospital, they have an area there where they focus on mental health for children, and some of those resources are free. So that's definitely a good source to connect with. But yeah, absolutely. So from the little ones to the adults, we try to place them or provide a resource to them at all age levels.
Awesome. That's good. So she'll make sure that Pastor Enid, she'll put it in the chat, all that information, because I know it was a lot of information that we've been talking about and giving you guys, but we will provide it in the chat. And then, like we mentioned before, we'll have our contact information. Email us, give us a call, let us know what you need. We'll give you the resources right away. As we mentioned before, all the other guests that we've had, they provide their information as well as other resources, which a lot of them are free. that you can utilize to your benefit as well.
Absolutely. So I know you guys are wondering, okay, neither Pastor Enid or Jessica is Dr. Hill. So she will be tuning in and join with us shortly. So I want to encourage you, if there are questions or things that are on your heart or on your mind that you may be curious about, you can go ahead and either place those questions in the Q&A box that's there or in the chat, and we'll make sure that we address those. This conversation is going to be really important to have, especially when we think about the plight of Black women and mental health. How are we taking care of ourselves? Are we suppressing everything? Or do we have others that we can reach out to in community that we can connect with? So I'm really excited about how to be equipped, and my favorite two words, being equipped and empowered on, on self-care and just being aware. When we know more and we have more information, we can do more.
Right, exactly. And just kind of like you're saying, peeling back those layers of certain things that that are kind of more specific to African American women, that is usually we tend to not address because we have so many things going on, and so many roles that we have to play. We just kind of let those things kind of pass by, and you just kind of kind of put yourself last and put everything else and everyone else first. So just making sure to bring those issues up to the light, pull those things out of the dark, and address them head on, and she'll provide us great tools on what we can do to face them, and not only face them, but get through them.
And Jessica, let's go ahead and get the introduction out of the way. So, so when she comes in, she can just hop right into this important topic. But why don't you tell us a little bit about Dr. Hill and who she is and where she's working and serving, and how you two connected.
Okay, so and she's about to log in now. I just got her message, but Dr. Hill, she is a staff psychologist, consultant, and curator of spaces. She's actually employed fully at Stanford University, where she is the liaison to the law center there, and she also works closely with women of color in the Women of Color Collective. She provides clinical and non-clinical services to students, staff, faculty, and the faculty of Stanford and leadership in the efforts of diversity, equity, and inclusion at Stanford University, Counseling and Psychological Services Center. She's also the owner and president of Hill Psychological and Consultation Services, where she provides her expertise in facilitating critical dialogue that is necessary for the mental health and well-being of Black women. So she considers her purpose in simple words and a complex meaning: empowering women to be the highest version of themselves, which is awesome. And of course, she's a fitness fanatic, which I think also probably helps with her mental health as well. So we are really excited to welcome her in. Very excited to hear her expertise and all the things that she's been doing as she's been at Stanford University. I think actually she's finishing up her first year there. So I'm just really excited to have her as a guest here to speak with you guys.
Absolutely. We had a chance to visit with her last night and kind of go through some of the things. So I just want to encourage you guys to hang on in there. It's going to be worth the wait. And you won't have to hear again.
Right.
In some regard. So, but yeah, so just in our conversation last night, it was really important, and just the information that she shared and her level of research that she's done, and even through her own experiences and living those out. So we're really excited about our time together.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Just making sure we tackle those things for sure. It's always, the diversity of it can be, a little overwhelming. But at the same time, there's a ways to get through it. So I'm sure she'll provide those things for us.
Yes, indeed. And don't forget to type your questions. Even if you're wondering what are microaggressions, or what things have you been wrestling with or concerned about, even as a Black woman in this culture and everything. So we're really excited.
Yes. And I think I see Dr. Hill right here.
Okay,
How
great.
you doing, ma'am?
I'm adjusting and being adaptable and flexible and all the things that is necessary, but I'm here and excited to be.
Thank you
Great.
so much for joining us. So I'm just glad you have arrived and you are safe. That's the most important thing for sure.
No, thank you so much. I appreciate that.
So we already have given your really, really beautiful introduction of all the great things you have accomplished, making
Aw,
everybody get their life right with all this stuff you've done. But so let everyone know you're going to be talking about microaggressions and what how that affects us as African American women
mm,
in this present time. So if you would like, we can go ahead and start your PowerPoint.
that would be good if you
It's
could pull
good
that
and
up
get
for me.
you all set up. So let's see
Okay.
what
Yeah.
in there.
I will share my screen then. Hold on. And then we do have one question that's come in already.
Already.
Okay.
So we will get to that in just a second. So let me go ahead and share my screen. Okay, and Dr. Hill, I will follow your lead in terms of transition, okay?
Perfecto. All right. So, number one, thank you all. I'm excited to be here to talk about. I think microaggressions is just one of the many. I call it a death by a thousand cuts that I think Black women experience on a day to day. So I'm just really excited to be here to talk about it. I appreciate you all's flexibility with me. I would have loved to be in a location where I would feel like I can really kind of be in my full element, but because of, travel restraints and things like that, I am not. But because this is a topic that I can do in my sleep, I'm really excited to share it with you. So I really feel like, you're the best when you're on your toes. So I'm going to be on my toes today. And I hope that you all will ask questions, engage, if there are points that I'm making that don't seem clear, I really hope that you all will engage in the comments and really ask me more questions about it. So let's hop into it.
Okay.
With what are microaggressions. So before we even go into content, I really like to have conversations about what are microaggressions. When let's take it all the way back to post civil rights movement, right? Where we understood, because microaggressions to me are rooted in racism. They manifest, of course, in sexism. They can even manifest in, patriarchy or homophobia and all these types of different isms, if you will. And so because I am a scholar, I can get really brainy. So pull me back in if it feels like it's becoming too academic. But I think I like to give the context of where microaggressions kind of derived from. So prior to civil rights movement, right? And I think about microaggressions for Black women specifically, really being rooted in racism. Prior to that, racism was covert, right? It was hosing you down, calling you the N-word, making signs that are saying whites only. That was kind of what we would call overt, right? Racism. Well, once that became no longer socially acceptable, then racism began to be more covert. And so covert manifests in these kind of unconscious, internalized biases toward Black people, specifically as it relates to today's topic towards Black women, whereby you have this undercurrent bias towards Black women, and it comes out in your conversation. It comes out in your backhanded compliments. It comes out in, the ways in which people kind of, we'll talk about, gaslight you or dismiss your comments. So when we think about microaggressions, some people get caught up in micro. They're never micro. They really usually are big. When we say microaggression, it's because it's no longer overt in a way, but it is still covert, and we experience it day by day. And Sue and Sue named this. You could go to the next slide, Enid. Sue and Sue named the microaggressions because it's something that had been happening for people all the time. We just didn't have a name for it. And so when we take a moment and we look at what they are and how they're defined by Wing and Sue, it's brief and commonplace daily verbal, behavioral, environmental indignities. Let's just sit with that. Like, that is daily. It comes out verbally, it comes out behaviorally, it comes out environmentally. And we're going to talk a little bit more about what that looks like specifically. Whether it's intentional, some people intend to microaggress you. So we're going to, as we take in the definitions, I really want you all to kind of pause and think about, okay, in what ways do I experience this the most? Do I experience it verbally? Do I experience it non-verbally? Is it intentional by my colleagues or by my peers or by my partners or by my friends? Is it unintentional? And there are indignities, and they communicate hostile, derogatory, or negative prejudice slight. So think about how loaded that is. When you think about how loaded this definition is, it becomes clear that it's not a micro anything. It's a big thing. And so, but because it comes as small slight over time, day in and day out, it begins to wear on you and have a bigger impact. Usually it's brief, everyday exchanges that send denigrating messages at certain individuals because of their group membership. So when I think about microaggressions, just because of where my work is, race is most salient to my identity, race, gender, and sexuality. So I think about the ways in which people experience microaggressions based on their race, based on their gender, and based on their sexuality. And sometimes in one day, you can experience microaggressions based on all the above. And so will you go to the next slide for me, Enid? Here are some examples when you read them and just kind of take them in. And I want to say that, microaggressions they could be targeting any marginalized group. So when we think about any marginalized group, any group that is not white, not dominant, not heterosexual, not cisgender, meaning, female at birth identifies female, male at birth identify as male. The more marginalized identities you hold based on society, the more you are vulnerable to microaggressions, and the more the microaggressions have an impact on you, right? So thinking about these, and here's the thing that I say, as a person who's very intuitive and very spiritual, you really usually know when something's off with a microaggression because it doesn't land well with you. Yeah, some people that I work with say, we're going to do a workshop on microaggressions and we're going to call it "You're Not Crazy." Essentially, like, you're not crazy. The things that you're experiencing, it manifests in the emotional reaction you have. It may linger with you, something somebody may say, something somebody may do, even via email. I know Black women who are in professional settings experience microaggressions often via email, via meetings, sometimes being spoken over, being dismissed with comments. It's constant and it's ongoing, and it feels like a death by 1,000 cuts. So you go to the next one, and then we're going to pause. And I'm really curious, now that we're taking in, that's a very academic explanation of microaggressions. What I like to do in conversations is take it from the brain academically to the heart and make it more personable, and talk about in what ways are you internalizing this, and what ways are you finding examples. If you plan back through your week alone, I've experienced microaggressions this week alone. In what ways do microaggressions show up for you, and what are some of your own personal experiences of them?
Well, okay. So let's see. I would think by going back to even from the last slide, I saw like one of the big things that talk about like I don't see you as a Black person. That's really common. And I think also, even for me being, dark skinned, you'll hear, oh, well, you're pretty for being dark skinned, or something that relates to, being dark skinned, things like that people may think is a compliment, but it is not a compliment at all.
So, because I like to say, let's peel back the layer of the onion, right? Like, if you're saying that I am pretty for a dark skinned girl, right, which we get that often, then what are you really implying? That your underlying bias that you may not even tap into is that dark skinned girls are not pretty. So then you must be the exception. And so because you're the exception, then now that even goes, let's take it a step further. Then what is pretty? What is the standard of beauty? So in my mind, I have a standard of beauty, which is, could be lighter complexion or aligned with whiteness, and, maybe a certain hair texture, maybe a certain symmetry in the face, maybe a certain dialect, maybe the way you enunciate your words. And because I have this underlying belief about what beauty is, you're challenging all of it right now. So, but it comes out in the microaggression because it's like, wow, you're pretty for a white girl. Now, I would say that, I don't see color as just racist. I'm at that place in my life where, you're basically saying that you're actively choosing not to see me because you do see color. Everybody sees color. So you're actively choosing not to see me. So that's kind of like a racist comment to me, but a lot of people still kind of name it as a microaggression.
Right. True. Even and I think Enid had mentioned this, the you speak so well.
So so then like I say, what's the assumption is that you were shocked that I should speak well. And so every time you say these comments, it reminds me of what you really think of me. It reminds me of the ways in which you see me. It reminds me in the ways in which you have boxed me. And that is when we begin to get to the impact of the mental health.
Because then you're questioning, like when people say that, are you saying my tone or my accent, or are you saying, is it just more of a, the type of English? Am I speaking broken English? Am I speaking the correct? I mean, what do you mean by that? Or is it, it's really mostly about, hey, an accent? Because someone from the North could be like, oh, I love how you talk, So it happens.
It's all of the above though, right? It's really all the above, because the reason why it makes it aggressive and derogatory in nature, or like kind of dehumanizing, is because you're basically telling me that there's a certain way in which you feel that I should engage, the way I should speak, the way I should sound, that's acceptable, that will earn your respect for you to even see me as human. And when you don't do that, then you are reminding me by these, backhanded comments or by these different statements that you don't. And that's how it begins to weigh at you, because it's really dehumanizing at the end of the day. Because nobody is saying to, it depends on in what ways you're being microaggressed. No one is saying to, I would just say like a white female or a white male, you speak very well to be white, or you look very well to be white. That's not the norm. So you kind of know it's coming from a place of bias. It's coming from a place of overt or covert racism, and that's how it weighs down on you over time.
Okay.
So let's go to the impact of the mental health and why this is such an issue. So if you could go to the next slide, Enid, we could begin to talk about some of the different ways we experience this death by 1,000 cuts. Now, it is a lot of cuts, right? It wears over time, and I see this so often. So I have a private practice that is dedicated. 98% of the women I see are Black women. Outside of my private practice, I work full-time at Stanford. I work with the students. I work with the upper administration. I work with the counseling and psychological services. And when I tell you that this is, if you did a list of top presenting concerns, all of these are the top presenting concerns of the Black students that I serve, or the Black women that I serve, who are operating in spaces that don't see them, or operating in spaces that are not predominantly Black. What is the impostor syndrome? We see it all the time. So the more in which people are starting to kind of like give you these comments like, well, do I speak well? Or like, should my dialect be different? Or should I have, a different type of education? Or should I be from a different type of place? You're now starting to question yourself. So the impact of experiencing these microaggressive comments all day, every day, starts to make you second guess if you should even be in this place, or if you are capable of operating at a certain level, if you're capable or competent to be able to do your job, which is what we refer to as imposter syndrome. Black women literally feel like I'm an imposter, like I don't belong here. And it's not about the person, it's the environment and the context and the system that has made it so hostile that you feel that you don't belong. And that is part of the ways in which we internalize the system's messaging to us. So one of the impacts to mental health is imposter syndrome. And that's pretty hard for people who feel like they are in an environment 40 hours of the week, who don't belong. Another impact is what we refer to as stereotype threat. And I don't know if you all are familiar with stereotype threat, but it's basically kind of all of the different stereotypes that exist for Black women. They will actively feel the need not to respond in that way so as not to be perceived as the stereotype.
Right.
So for instance, we're sitting in a meeting and someone says something disrespectful or somebody says something backhanded and I become angry. most Black women I see was like, well, I can't really be angry. I really can't show that I'm angry because I don't want to be the angry Black woman. Or I don't want to speak too passionately or too loudly because I don't want to be perceived as aggressive.
Mm-hmm.
Or I don't want to, show that this is impacting me and hurting me because I don't want to be perceived as weak because I'm supposed to be strong all the time. I can't let them know that I'm vulnerable. So when these stereotype threats is what eats away at our humanity, right? It boxes us. We can't experience emotion. We can't defend ourselves. Well, we can. That's my challenge. You can speak with emotion, but you have to begin to understand that this is part of a larger system that's operating against you, labeled as a microaggression in many different ways, that's having an impact on you and your mental health and your well-being. We experience tokenism, where I don't know if you're trying to talk before.
Oh, no, I was going to say with the stereotype threat, that usually because of that, like you were saying, if you're in a work environment, number one, between the imposter syndrome and the stereotype threat, it seems like you're constantly having to change yourself a million times a day, which is mentally wearing. And then you're at a point where you don't even know who you are at some point.
Exactly.
Who the real person is. Like, where can I fit in? I have to be these way and adjust myself to so many different people in my life. So that's insane. The mental health capacity for that is just...
There is not one, right? And it's unsustainable. If you walk away, if you all walk away with nothing else from this webinar, I hope you understand that this impact of microaggressions and the ways in which we are constantly having to shape and mold is unsustainable. Mm-hmm. And the way in which you break free from that is you have to be liberated in that. There is, I will say all the time, I am not being aggressive, I'm being assertive. Aggression is acting with the intent to harm, and I'm not. In fact, I think that was kind of microaggressive for you to even say that to me. Or to question, it's interesting, my colleague is speaking, so, his tone was louder. He changed his voice, it got inflated, or he raised his tone rather, and nobody perceived that as problematic. But when I do it, then that's a challenge. So can we talk to me about why that's acceptable for him and not for me?
Right.
That's the liberation.
So much. You see that so much. I think we were talking about that in terms of how people get help, like when they go into the ER. When most people are going into the ER, especially if it's about their child, they're more, hyped. They're anxious. They want their child to be seen. So if someone that's not of color goes in, the doctors are taking them to, hey, this child really needs to help. They really need to hurt. If it is a woman of color, African American woman goes in and they're trying to get hold of their child and they're reacting the same way. Well, oh, you're overreacting. This child is maybe not that. You're not as sick, and then that's how you get to these like the high maternal, deaths, with African American women, or our needs are not met. You know what I mean? You're just trying to figure out how. The only thing you're trying to figure out is how to get the help that you need. That you're just
exactly
aggressive.
Trying to get the help that you need. I'm glad that you brought that up in terms of like the mortality rate when Black women are trying to give birth, because there is research and data to support that. If they surveyed physicians, I don't know if it was 2014 or 2015, and they all came in with, I would say not all, but I would say a significant portion of that sample, maybe probably about 75%, said that they didn't perceive Black people as experiencing pain. They have a higher tolerance for pain than other people. So think about the implications of that, like in multiple domains of life, not just when you are trying to give birth, but also when you're experiencing emotional pain, or when you're in the ER, as you said, or when your kid is in the ER. And so that's why it's very important for us to be mindful of what microaggressions feel like in the many ways in which they can show up. Because if you're not careful, then you'll start to, number one, second guess yourself. Right, that's called being gaslit, feeling like it's not happening, and then you begin to kind of shape and change yourself and try to be perceived as a non-threatening person, or a person who should be taken seriously, or a person who's non-aggressive. And it, like you said, you start to act like this for so long, you're like, who am I? We cannot operate and be fully well if we're not operating as our authentic self. And so that's very important. And so this is another one of the cuts that we have is the stereotype threat, or feeling shame, or feeling confusion, or feeling socially isolated, or feeling anxious. And I tell people all the time, the body keeps the count. If we don't process that stress that we're experiencing as being, I work in an environment where most times you are the only Black, the only, they call it, so the only Black female or the only female, you know, working with other people. And so the anxiety of feeling the stereotype threat that we talked about. I even talk about tokenism, knowing that when these you know, predominantly white places sometimes, or predominantly male places, will try to integrate and be diverse by putting a token. And so the token is just for you to be represented at the table. It's not for you to have a voice at the table. It's not for you to show up as your full self at the table. And I think, and I don't think, I know from practice and from professional experience, Black women begin to feel that. So it's feeling like I'm here, but I'm not really valued. I'm just here just to say that we check the box, or that there's a token at the table. And those, that eats away, I can't stress that enough, that eats away at your humanity, and it becomes unsustainable over time, and it starts to take a physical form. And once stress takes a physical form, it can cause physical concerns, high cholesterol, high stress, hypertension, in some instances stroke, and death. Like, that is the reality of it, unchecked. I put that on there to leave it because it is very, very important to understand that racial trauma, gender trauma, as Black women moving through the world, we're going to experience more hurdles, more challenges. We're going to be operating against more systems that are operating against us, that don't give us the space to be who we are. And if we don't understand that and check in with ourselves to be able to manage that, we're going to experience the death 5,000 cut.
So, Dr. Hill, that is very great insight, which leads me to a question that we have from one of our guests. And the question is, how do I operate transparently within the work team focused on increasing diversity? I'm the only Black person in the diversity group.
Oh, that's loaded. I have coaching sessions for these very questions that women bring up. I would say there's a few different strategies that I have used and coach people to use. One of which is to be able to determine if there's true buy-in from leadership. Because a lot of times, if the leadership is not bought in on a very emotional level, not just like a surface level, then you'll end up doing the work. And I see this happen with a lot of Black women who are diversity, equity, inclusion officers that I provide consultation to or provide therapy to. It becomes clear that the administration is not bought in. The leadership is not bought in, and therefore they're not giving them what I mean by that is they're not giving them the resources, they're not giving them the time, they're not giving them the compensation to be able to do that work. So before you engage and invest in that, I would determine what's the level of buy-in, what's the level of investment. My second point is always, and I like to get kind of broad and then like contextualize it, because I really don't know, what kind of environment this woman is in, or, what she's tasked with. But I always like to tell people diversity is great, but if you don't shift the environment and the culture by which you're bringing diverse people in, then you're only contributing to their ultimate demise. So it needs to be a conversation about not just diversity, but it needs to be a conversation about inclusion as well as equity. Because if you get me into this environment, but it's hostile, how is that going to benefit anybody? So I would say, it's very hard to kind of talk specifics, because every department, every organization, every leader is different. But the conversations that I begin to, invite women to be able, Black women specifically, to be able to have with themselves is, to what degree is the leadership, committed to diversifying? And are they open to understanding that diversity is only a piece of the solution? It's not the solution. Diversifying, understanding the culture, understanding how to make that culture more inclusive and how to make it more equitable, because we know that equality means that we all get the same thing. And the reality is that we're not all moving through the world in the same way. So it's not about equality, it's about equity. And those conversations, I would say those three pieces need to be held as be a part of the conversation at the same time: diversity, equity, and inclusion, as like a starting place. And then of course that becomes more specific based on the specific environment and the specific challenges that they're facing.
That's good.
So I wanted to just kind of let people like read this and kind of like take it in and just take a moment, right? It's been, I would imagine at this point in time, you've been educated on what microaggressions are, maybe beginning to identify some of the ways in which it shows up in your world, it shows up in your life. Sometimes that's very hard to sit with, because we find that it's happening in even our most intimate relationships, even our most intimate friendships. And think about the fact that microaggressions at their core don't just hurt your feelings, but it hurts you. It hurts you, it hurts your mental health and your well-being, and the different ways in which it does, because our bodies are taking these comments in as threats. And so I won't read.
Dr. Can you give us of what that looks like in a relationship? Or like intimate relationships?
One of the ways, what's common and what I'm kind of working on doing a series on is Black women, by and large, let's say, who are engaged with Black men, by virtue of patriarchy and sexism, that same racist ideology, right, about Black women, and then we could just kind of go down, even Black women with a darker complexion, with natural hair, are experienced, or there's so many norms and messages that we get that we're supposed to engage and behave in a certain way, right? Black men, you know, sometimes Black female friends, Black leaders, they are not exempt from internalizing those messages. They're not exempt from those ways and those biases in which they see you. So you may see it show up intimately in a sense of more sexism in nature, as opposed to racially motivated, more sexually motivated, as if you're moving beyond the scope of autonomy you should be moving in, or you should not be speaking so assertively, or you should not be pursuing certain opportunities or professional opportunities, or you should be prioritizing maybe only family and not career, or the spouse's career should be prioritized over yours. To me, I conceptualize that as microaggressive, but more toward targeting your gender as a Black female. And so I think that that's what makes this reality that it could, you know, it doesn't just hurt your feelings, it hurts you, because you begin to not only experience microaggression in the workplace, racially and genderly, but then you begin to experience it in your more intimate relationships. And so then you feel like a lot of, 50% of the women that I see would say that they're experiencing it in both places, professionally and personally, and that's what makes it more challenging.
Yeah, because it's like a catch-22. And I think earlier today I was looking at just like a news report, and the gentleman pointed out how much African American women was left out of history in the civil rights movement. And like even now, you don't know that it was 3 African American women that started the Black Lives Matter movement, and people.
Absolutely, I feel like that's always the case, because you got to think about the civil rights movement in that particular time, where, you know, Black women have always been in a space where they've had to choose. They've either had to choose gender or they had to choose race. When they chose gender, because we have a very unique, and this is the work, I forget her name right now, where she speaks about intersectionality. I have to send that resource over. But the intersectionality basically means is if we are intersecting in ways in which our male and non-Black peers are not intersecting. What do I mean by that? Well, we are oppressed gender-wise. And so at this particular point in time during the civil rights, it's like, okay, we can align with gender, but when we align with gender, it was historically white women, and then the concerns of Black women specifically weren't being centered, right? Then it's like, okay, we are also not only we're being oppressed by our gender, we're being oppressed by our race. And therefore we will align with Black men, because we will align with our race, but even that, the Black female voice was getting left out of that conversation. And you see mostly Black men at the forefront of civil rights movement. When we know, I love this quote when Martin Luther King is doing his infamous "I have a dream" speech. Well, it wasn't the name of the speech, but that's what it's been, you know, known for. I have a dream. He looks to the crowd and he looks for I think it's Mahalia. She said, tell him about the dream, Martin. That speaks to me and tells me how much counsel that these forerunners, these Black men, were getting from Black women. Yet when we think about the civil rights movement and we think about the people who were leaders, that historically has been left out of the conversation. And so I feel like that is why my specific passion is for Black women, because we intersect at these levels whereby our voice is silenced. When we align with race, the conversation, we get left out of the conversation about Black women needs. When we align with gender, we get left out of the conversation with Black women's needs. And it becomes challenging for us to even exist, you know, because you're trying to navigate both sexism and racism and patriarchy all at one time. And that's what I mean by we have more unique battles to fight. And so when you're experiencing those type of microaggressions, it stings a little bit more, because you're getting it based on race and gender and sexuality if you don't identify as heterosexual.
Absolutely. That's so true.
Mm-hmm. There's a lot. It's levels to it. You're just taking it in. It's like I feel like this is just the beginning of several conversations. Like when you really begin to think about just what I see in my work, scholarly as well as professionally and even individually. When I'm, talking to peers, we have a very unique experience as Black women. We are called to be nurturers. We're called to be supportive. We're called to, be the moral compass for the world, but we don't get the recognition or the respect or the honor for that. And that manifests, one of the ways that manifests is microaggressions, and that becomes problematic over time. So this kind of speaks to I just want to underscore the point that I just said, which there's strong evidence that minority stress, which is what I just led to, all of these things will be considered minority stress on multiple different levels, is elevated. It's linked to elevated levels of depression and trauma amongst minorities. When you think about your position and all the ways in which you are subject to harm and subject to trauma on a day-to-day basis, that's going to make you more vulnerable for mental health disorders or more mental health symptoms like anxiety, like depression, like trauma. This is just to name a few. And so it could also lead to increased symptoms, which subsequently may lead to increased thoughts of suicide and self-harm. I want to normalize that is often a concern when people feel so siloed. Black women feel so siloed and so isolated and unheard, and they don't have the language. Like most of you will be getting the language today. When they don't have the language to name what's happening to them, it just kind of feels like, you're just kind of moving through the world. And so half of the battle is understanding what's happening to you because of your unique position in the United States. And then the other piece of it is to actively work to have boundaries for yourself, to assert yourself, to empower yourself, to surround yourself in community with people who understand it and who get it, and to be allied with people who will help disrupt those norms and disrupt those structures and disrupt those systems that make your existence difficult.
Yeah, because I can only imagine you can fall into that so quickly and not even realize it, because as African American women, you're expected to be strong, or you're not expected to have a time that you need rest, or you need to be to be depressed or do anything like that. You're expected to get up and get it, handle the kids, take care of grandma, make sure okay, so the mental health behind that, and I don't even think, and most times you even think to yourself, now recently of being, with some African American women taking advantage of the time to say, hey, I need to take a breath, I need to breathe, or I need a break.
Mm-hmm. And I think that so my first message that I say, if you don't walk away with anything, I will hope you will walk away with understanding that trying to conform to people's expected narrative of you is unsustainable. I would also say my second message would be, if we don't set boundaries as Black women, people will always feel entitled to you and more of you. People will feel entitled to your strength. They will feel entitled to your wisdom without recognition. They will feel entitled to your nurturing without being able to receive it. They will feel entitled to, your visionary, being a vision without respecting it. So all of the traits in which Black women have, I tell people all the time, we are magical, but we're also human. And so we can't confuse the two. How else can you be having all of these different systems and structures and norms and policies operating against you and still continue to thrive? So we are that, but if we're not careful, and it's like, if we're not careful and we don't set boundaries for ourselves, then that narrative that this is an expectation will continue to persist. So when people project that onto you, if I take that example of, okay, I'm tired, I've worked 40 hours a day, I'm also a mom who has a kid, and I have a partner, and I am exhausted and I am depleted. And if the narrative that I'm saying to myself is, well, this is what I'm supposed to do, and I still have to deliver, and I still have to show up, and I still have to cook, and I still have to do these things, if I don't stop and say, you know what, that's actually not sustainable in this moment. Like, what do I need in this moment? How do I set a boundary for myself? How do I ask for more help? How do I disperse more of my responsibility so that I can breathe? Then guess what? You're going to maintain and perpetuate that narrative for other people to believe that you're supposed to do that all the time, that you're supposed to do your 40 hours and have your kiddo and have your partner and show up for friends and show up for your grandmother, all of which is these things that we are by nature, I think that we want to do. You know, I don't think that, well, for some people, I don't want to speak for all women. Some people don't have a desire to do that, but we want to do. But it's become clear that people are entitled and expecting of us to do that. And they will always expect more and more and more until we set boundaries about what that should look like.
Right. And even just making sure, like, when you do that, like, you're not feeling, I think for me, it would be like not feeling guilty about it. You know what I mean? Or being like, oh, I didn't make that task. Oh, failure. You know what I mean? Those type of things on yourself.
Because you gotta, you know, I would challenge you to figure out where does that narrative come from? It's not your story. It was somebody else projecting their story onto you about what it is that you need to be doing at what time, at what capacity, without limitations, for them ultimately to benefit. And that's whether it's a company benefiting, you know, a partner benefiting, a child benefiting, whomever. That demand on what you need to produce is a benefit. People are beneficiaries of that. And so guilt comes when you feel like there's something. I tell people I'm emotion focused in my work, so I think emotions come to give us information all the time. So guilt is there to tell you, to make you feel as if there's something that I should have done that I didn't do. That's guilt, right? So then you got to ask yourself, okay, what's the story that I'm telling myself? What should I have done that I shouldn't have done? What haven't I done that I feel like I should have done? Okay, is that realistic? Was that practical? Was that sustainable? And then how do I begin to adapt that story such that I can say to myself, you know what, it's okay. I'm tired, you know, like it's okay if I can't show up. It's okay if I can't be everything to everybody in this moment, and I'm going to be okay with that.
So, Dr. Hill, how important is it for Black women to learn the power of no and not feeling guilty about that, and setting healthy boundaries, and knowing that no can be a weapon, but also can be a lifesaver in some cases?
I think it's very, very, very important for us to know that. I think it's significant. It to me, it's what I said about boundaries. No is a boundary. We all have them. No is a boundary to say, this is where I draw the line. You know, I don't have the capacity. I don't have the bandwidth. I can't do that. Or I need to be pouring into people who can pour into me. You know, I need to be taken on task with support, because if not, again, people will always expect your yes. Why would they not? If we don't even assert no, then why? Yeah, if you're gonna keep giving me what I want, what I need at no cost to me, and no, you know, to the person who's requesting it, then of course I'm gonna keep asking. We have to get to that. Now, I will say it's not easy. That's work, right? That's workshops, that's tools, that's therapy, to be able to undo the emotional connection to what it means to say no. Like, to untie that narrative, because those emotional reactions come from stories that we've told ourselves, and those stories come from messages that we've gotten since birth. And those messages are all times rooted in racism, patriarchy, sexism. So we have to get to the point where we recognize this story was never mine. It's one that I took on. Let me figure out what parts of it really fit for who I am and what parts of it don't.
Yeah, because I think even when you're growing up, to a certain extent, in the gender role of being a female, you're expected to be, yes, you're the helper. You're expected to be smiling all the time. You're expected, you know, those are just some expectations that women, you know, is in the role that you know, that just automatically are put on you. And when you kind of push back from that, you know, then you're kind of feeling like, oh, well, maybe I'm not acting, but you're authentic. So maybe you're not a smiley person, or maybe you don't want to, you know, do dance classes. Maybe you want to take karate, you know, make sure that, you know, kids or girls are having the option of having a choice, rather than saying, this is what you should do and this is how you should act. I've even heard in certain like stories or different studies where some kids, girls will not be diagnosed for autism as quick as boys because girls are always trying to force or play into gender roles. So they don't get diagnosed for autism or things like that as quickly as boys because boys are free to act who they are, right? So girls can just, go for a while without being even diagnosed. And it's simply because
under the radar.
Yeah, under the radar, those force roles.
And I think, I understand the function of where gender roles come from, right? Like just from a purely, and here's where my academic lens comes in, just from a purely neurological perspective, we need to be able to make sense of information. We quickly want to categorize things because if we don't, it's just too much information our brain is throwing at us at one time. If you see this classically with kids who begin to label every four-legged thing as a dog. It's like, oh, that's a category. It's a category that's got to be a dog because it has 4 legs. So I'm going to name it as such. So our brain wants to make sense of what do people who identify as female do? What do people who identify as male do? And let me kind of govern myself accordingly. Let me socialize accordingly. Let me expose accordingly. So I understand fundamentally why we want to do it. The problem with it is that when it becomes rigid and boxed. You can't expect that every person who identifies as female is going to operate with the same roles, going to be interested in doing the same things. None of us are built the same. We're not monolithic. And so there are certain things that I may appreciate and enjoy doing that you may not appreciate or enjoy doing because you have boxed me into this rigid role. Like the gender roles, the people run into challenges when they become so rigid and they don't allow themselves to expand about and revisit or even reimagine what it means to be female. And so I think that it has implications on so many different levels, personally, professionally, relationally, spiritually. It impacts everything. So I think it's very, very, very important for us to pause, to really think about when we're operating and moving in and day out. It's kind of like, is this the role that I want to play? Does this feel like a fit for me? Or is this the role that I feel that people have assigned to me? Because I'm not an actress. I'm a person. So I'm not trying to act out a role that somebody has assigned to
me. Do you think go ahead, Enid, go ahead.
Dr. Hill, how much of the issue with no could also be tied to wanting to be accepted, afraid to say no for that fear of rejection or not having another opportunity again that may present itself? So I think we have to be cautious about that as well.
I mean, because what you're getting at is kind of like speaking to maybe a scarcity mentality, believing that if I don't do this, then this is the last opportunity. If I don't connect with this person, then I won't connect with anybody. If I don't make it with this partner, then I'm never going to have a partner. That's fundamentally, you have to challenge, where is that coming from? Because that's coming from an insecurity. If my friendship with you is based on my productivity and what I can do for you, then I need to revisit that friendship. If this opportunity is one which I am not going to be able to sustain, then if I'm going to have to do this work and I know that it's not sustainable, then this is probably not the opportunity for me. And there can't be this sense of scarcity behind it. And so I think that we have to figure out where is that coming from. And again, that moment to pause, to be able to reflect and think about why are we operating this way? Where is this coming from? Is very, very essential. Very essential.
All right, that's good. Do you want me to go to the next slide or?
Yeah, let's go to the next one. But I'm liking the conversation.
I am too. I'm not rushing us at all, but I think it's very valuable. I was just trying to make sure you got everything you wanted. I'm eating it all up.
I know, right?
I love it. I appreciate y'all for being engaged. So I think I'm not going to read all of this because it's exhausted. It's not an exhaustive list, is what I was trying to say. But I hope that additionally with the resources that you all send out, you could add this slide, because there's so many different ways in which we can cope with minority stress. Because remember, we're experiencing minority stress as a female and we're experiencing it as Black female. And if you're not identifying as heterosexual, you're experiencing it as a Black female who is non-heterosexual. Think about the levels in which you're experiencing that minority stress. And so therefore, you have to be very intentional about how you're going to cope with it and what works for you. I tell people when I put out coping mechanisms, it's like coping mechanisms are like dating. You're not going to like everybody, and it's not going to be a hit the first time. Sometimes you got to try some different things out. And so some things work for certain people, some things don't work for other people, or Sometimes you need different type of coping mechanisms in certain type of situations, in certain types of circumstances. So this is some ways to begin to think about it. But I think the first and foremost to be able to cope is to be aware. Is to begin to pause and be aware of what is going on for me. Let's rewrite the narrative that we are supposed to be busy so much and being everything to everybody that we can't even be present for ourselves. Because if we can't be present for ourselves, then we can't be present for anyone. And I tell people, I just don't believe that's what God has for me. It's for me to be present for everybody except myself. I feel like I am just as precious and just as valuable and just as worthy as everyone else is. And so if I can give it to someone else, then I'm going to give it to myself as well. And so if we're able to pause and check in with ourselves, we'll be able to feel like, okay, that didn't land well with me. Was that a microaggression? Was I being microaggressed because I'm female? Was I being microaggressed because I'm Black female? And am I being microaggressed because I'm not fitting into this gender role? About how I'm supposed to operate because those are your projective assumptions about the ways in which I'm supposed to be in this world. And if I can pause and check in with myself, then I can figure out, well, what is it that I need? What kinds of support do I need? Maybe I need to go have a year of no. Maybe I need to set some more boundaries. Maybe I need to have some very challenging conversations with the people I'm in relationship with. Maybe I need to set harder boundaries in my life. So I think that this is a way to get the conversation started. But this is by no means an exhaustive list to cope. So I always like to end and wrap up with a reflective, some moment to take it in. I think we take in so much different information, and I'm very intentional about giving people moments to pause, to reflect. So, and we can engage in the comments, or if people don't engage in the comments or the chat, I can definitely engage you too. What came up while listening to this talk today? And can you identify ways in which you frequently experience microaggressions?
Ouch. So I think for me, it just did provide a moment to thoughtfully reflect and engage on some of those experiences and how subtle sometimes microaggressions are, right? As much as we try to be woke and aware, sometimes, there's just this space where you just don't know what's happening around you. So for me, I thought it was very healthy and engaging dialogue that just being okay to, and I shared this with you the other day, how we advocate for ourselves, so not only just saying no, being empowered to say no, but also, no, I don't think I agree with what you say, or I don't appreciate that. So being able to speak up for yourself, advocate for yourself, and know that that there is strength and power in that, and we have no reason to shrink back. So I'm grateful for, and it was a wealth. I'm still thinking about that get out slide, just all of the things that are happening, and even how we cope with it. And so in finding the balance between coping and then suppressing, right? So so yeah.
That's really good. I'm glad that you pointed that out. That's something that I didn't mention, but it is very real. What's the difference between coping and what is denial and suppressing and pretending that it doesn't exist? Because that doesn't serve us when we do that. And that's that's a good point for people to sit with.
Yeah, I think that point definitely stuck out. I believe that when things like that happen with microaggressions, I think we realize it. For most women, you realize it, but then not knowing how to effectively cope with it. Because usually we're coping with unhealthy ways, right? So you're coping with it, you're kind of just taking it all in and not even dealing with it, ignoring it, which, like you said, comes out in so many ways as far as your health is concerned and chronic diseases, or in you're coping with it and just not not being in a healthy space. And I think that's where it's like we get hooked, like the fish hook gets started. You have the microaggression, you realize that you see what's going on, but you're not coping with it. Into this like hole. And then, like you said, then that leads to all those other things, losing who you are as a person. And then also another point is of realizing, just as human beings, like you're pointing out, that you can change, right? So the same person that an African-American woman that you were at 20 is not necessarily the same person that you're going to be at 40. So things and expectations that you have in your life at a younger age is completely different at 40. So then when certain people have only seen you in one context, and then they come back around to you again and you're in a different space, they're not able to handle it. So then you're getting the things like you said, like, oh, well, you're super aggressive now, or you're this. Well, no, I'm not. I've just, blossomed. I've grown, and now I'm in a different space.
I hope I change, right? Like when people are like, well, you changed, I'm like, yeah, you should be. We should be actively changing day to day. That's, to me, we're supposed to be evolving. And so I think when people, when sometimes you be careful, I feel like you have to be careful, because you change means I can't engage with you in the same way that I used to. Right. Or you now have different expectations of me, or you have different boundaries around me now. Your thinking is, more complex than what I would like. And so I feel as if, people, that to me is a subtle, it's like, well, what part, I think change is a compliment, but it feels like it's not landing that way. So what about this change is problematic for you? What about it is challenging for you? And I just think being able to having that permission to know that we should be evolving and asserting ourselves, as Enid says, not shrinking, is very, very important. It's very important.
Absolutely. I agree. I think in terms of addressing it with the mental health piece, like even for instance, I know I saw maybe recently, maybe a few weeks ago with Tamar, and she had an episode or whatever that was, I'm not sure everything that happened with that, but clearly it was something with, her mental health and dealing with everything she had. I think she ended up speaking out today, and addressing it on social media. But even seeing having such a vibrant personality, who you in your context of seeing her would not think that she would ever fall or be in a position to be where she is, but knowing, like you said, that Black women are human. And I don't think a lot of people get that, that we're human, that we have feelings, that we have emotions, but then also for us as Black women, fully acknowledging that, not when something's happened.
Right. And how different would it be if we do that? If we acknowledge those limits, if we acknowledge our limitations, like everybody else. We are like everybody else. We endure more. Our experience is different. We hold more. We're challenged by more. So that should be even more of an indicator as to why we are human. Why it's going to take a toll. I am not shocked at all, that there was that she made an attempt on her life, because it's hard being Black female. And I think that if the Black women that I serve went in therapy, it's a common place for people to get. And I think that people don't want to come to terms with that. When you are managing so much, and people may try to spiritualize it and say, well, it's just an attack, multiple different things, however you want to conceptualize it, multiple things being used to attack your spirit, attack your mental health, your well-being, who you are, your sense of identity, that will wear down anybody. And when you're not engaging in the things that we talked about in the slide prior to, where you have social support, where you are setting boundaries, where you are checking in with yourself, then you continue to become on E. And I use this metaphor with my women all the time. If you know that you're getting ready to travel across the country and you're going from California all the way to DC, you mean to tell me you would not stop for gas frequently? You would not, and in stopping for that gas, you would not have the most premium gas. You would have the premium gas, and you would stop frequently, because you understand that where you're traveling, where you're going, it's going to require some fuel. We are no different. And some of us are carrying different loads. Some of us are engaging in these different spaces, being in spaces that demand more of us. That's even more of a reason why we need to be stopping for fuel more often.
So Dr. Hill, that is a very good point. Something both you and Jessica talked about is how we define ourselves, or how other people try to place us in categories or define us for us. How important is it that we know who we are as our own person, and just, being, just knowing who we are, what we do, like what we are willing to do, what we're not willing to do. Because I think sometimes there are voids, or you're codependent on other people to define you or to help you get to that next space. You forget who you are. You never have your own self-identity, and others shape it for
Mm-hmm.
you. And then you end up being
Mm-hmm.
miserable. So just some sharing or thoughts on that.
Mm-hmm. I think it's very important for you to define yourself for yourself, because like I said, the most, I think, heartbreaking things that I see is when people have not done that and they're operating from somebody else's description and somebody else's projected and somebody else's narrative about who they are. And I think that we all have so much uniqueness and so much talent and so much beauty and so much different types of strengths and gifts. And it's just very heartbreaking when you don't tap into that, because you don't know who you are, because you've allowed people to define for you who you are, or you've molded yourself into this socially acceptable version of who you should be for the people who really don't matter. Because the people who are supposed to be in your life will be attracted to your authentic self and not a performed version of yourself. And so I think it's incredibly important for us to do that work. And that's terrifying for a lot of people, because they don't know who they are and they haven't had the space to even ask themselves, or giving themselves the space to even give themselves permission to ask themselves the question, who you are and who do I want to be? Although scary, it is the beginning. I think thoughtful reflection and being able to name that is the beginning of much growth, which can lead to a very, very fruitful life. But if and only if we understand the importance of knowing who we are and working towards that and operating in that consistently.
Absolutely. And even being aware of who the examples are that we're watching, what roles are, what the generations before us, what are we accustomed to seeing when it comes to women? And do we use that as the measure to define
Mm-hmm.
ourselves, and being
Mm-hmm.
okay to break away with that. If that's a traditional role that, may not suit well for your life, being okay to
Mm-hmm.
define your own route in road, and being sensitive and aware of that, I think is really
Mm-hmm.
as well. Yeah.
Yeah, we can take different inspirations, but we have to remember that everybody's story is not our story. I think that me and my mom are really close, and I talk to her about this all the time. Like, there's some pieces of her that I see me in, and there's some parts of the things that she is that I'm not, and that's okay. I can deviate from what I've seen. I'm inspired by her wisdom. I'm inspired by her strength. I'm inspired by her beauty. But the way in which she manages and moves through the world is sometimes different than me, and that's okay as well. And so I think we sometimes feel like we have to take every piece of these exemplars that we have, but we also have to remember that they have different lives, different stories, different contexts from us. And so I can say, well, I like the way my mom manages conflict in when it comes to her personal relationships. I want to embody that. And then also maybe the way I move professionally, I know for certain my mom is very much so I could put her in context of respectability politics in her time, whereby colorism was real and you had to be respectable for people to respect you as a Black person, let alone a Black female. So me having locks and them being colored locks and having a nose ring makes her incredibly uncomfortable. And that's not the way in which she feels like a professional Black woman should move through the world. And that's okay, because she's entitled to that perspective. And I've moving through the world as a Black woman in this way. And so it's about knowing that people have different truths and different narratives, but we have to know what fits for us to be able to move in a way that's going to work for us.
Right. I agree. And there's a level of like even just gaining self-esteem about yourself and the qualities and appreciating who you are and how God created you. That's
it. Completely agree.
Yeah. I remember when you got those locks.
I want to thank you all for being flexible, because I practice what I preach. So in an effort to attend to my own self-care and my own boundaries, I was traveling today and have just been set back time after time, set back in terms of traffic, and realized that I was going to be much more delayed to be able to get to the space that I need to be, check in, and be able to have a talk. But I am okay with that. Like, I am okay with being flexible, understanding that I have limitations. So I want to thank you all for being flexible, like engaging me as if I'm not in a car, because that really helps with me to understand that like you're really engaged in the content. And I forgot for a second that it's not the ideal space, but I use that I like to use real life examples. I use that as a real life example because I hope people will give themselves that same permission. Sometimes, we have things we want to accomplish and things that we want to do, and we set our intentions to do it. And sometimes we are met with challenges. And it's about how you become flexible with those challenges. How do you care for yourself in those challenges? And how do you give yourself permission to be human? And I feel like this is a classic example of giving yourself permission to, be human and understand that if we add more pressure, like, okay, I need to be able to do it this way under this circumstance, then that wears us down over time, and it's not helpful and it's not sustainable. And so I hope that that's a piece of the message that people are getting, that Black women are getting, is that, we definitely have strengths and magic and ways in which we are killing it in the world, and we also have limitations, and that's okay. And we need to be able to honor those limitations and attend to them. And if there's any follow-up questions or any inquiries about, I do a lot of work, curated conversations about topics related to women and their identity, women and their sexuality, women navigating how to integrate their different aspects of their identity into something that feels coherent and for them, very true to them. I have curated conversations about that, offer workshops related to diversity, equity, inclusion work for the earlier comment, and still do individual therapy for Black women who are presenting with a number of different concerns. Most notably, it's usually interpersonal concerns or issues around, how are they showing up in their relationship with themselves and how they're showing up in relationship with other people. And so I'm happy to accept any inquiries, and people can also follow me. My social media is all the same. So Facebook is Dr. LaWanda Hill, Instagram is Dr. LaWanda Hill, Twitter is Dr. LaWanda Hill, and my website is www.drlawandahill.com.
All right, we're gonna make sure to clear all that information, and then of course, like Dr. Hill also sent us a plethora of resources for all of us can utilize and check out if you want to dig a little deeper and more into microaggressions and then other subject matters to get mental health, the mental health that we need. We want to say thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Hill. We're glad you're safely. We hope you have so much.
Yes.
Kind of jealous, not gonna lie, but it's all good that you're gonna go on this great vacation.
Yes, I will have lots of, I don't know about fun, but lots of rest. That's the intent. It's a lot of rest to be able to recover and recharge, because that's part of it, right? Being able to check in with myself, see how I'm doing, what's working for me, what's not working for me, and what do I need? Because if I don't do that, if I don't take responsibility for that, I can't expect anybody else to. So I'm going to do a lot of resting and recharging. And I'll share some pictures so you can see the gorgeousness. It's gorgeous. So I'll be able to share.
Yeah. Well, Dr. LaWanda, you have been such a blessing to us. I mean, it is information overload, and I am so grateful just to have so much to take back and all the nuggets that came from our time together this evening. I know you're traveling. We appreciate you pulling over to the side of the road and being faithful to, to being here and making sure that we're equipped and could have this conversation, because I tell you what, between Jessica and I, it just was not going to happen, so we just would have shifted in a completely different direction. So I'm grateful. We know you're in the car. We'll just tell them it's your virtual background. So
yeah, tell them it's the that's my virtual background. I'm in the car. That's what I want people to feel today. Thank you for that. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Well, we pray that, you are just restored and refreshed, because you have truly poured out to us. So I'm prayerful that God would pour into you all that you continue to pour out and continue to be an advocate for our community and for Black women all over this world. So keep doing the great work that you're doing, and know that we're praying for you and we love you. And we hopefully we can get together again soon. And next time you're in Houston, please come by. Let's make some time.
Absolutely. Yes, thank you so much. I received those prayers. I received that restoration, that pouring back into. I'm confident that I'll receive that, and I will continue to root for everything that's Black, especially Black women.
That's right. I want to thank everyone for just being with us this evening. We are prayerful that you were also blessed by our time. I know we had lots of questions that came in, so we're grateful that you even took time to answer those and to respond to those. And it is almost 8 o'clock, so I think this is a wrap. So You.
Yeah, we
We're
want out of you for sure.
our live stream broadcast now.
That is for sure. So, Pastor Enid,